Today is October 27th, 2025, and my guest is journalist and author Sam Quinones. He was last here in October of 2021 talking about his book, The Least of Us. Our topic for today is his latest book, The Perfect Tuba, Forging Fulfillment from the Bass Horn, Band, and Hard Work. Sam, welcome back to EconTalk.
Well, it's great to be back with you, Russ. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure talking with you.
This is a very unusual book. I enjoyed it a great deal. I have to confess, I walked into the reading of it without, I would say, let's just say no knowledge. It's not quite true, but it's close enough. No knowledge of tubas, very little knowledge of band. But of course, those are the frame of the book. The book is also about some other things. So tell us what the book's about and how did it happen? How did you get into writing a book about tubas and band?
You were very much like I was. I do not play the tuba. I was never in marching band. I knew zero about the tuba when I started this. I wrote a couple of stories. At one point, that came upon. I was at the LA Times. There was this report that tubas were being stolen from the high schools, predominantly in the Mexican areas. And I knew why. It's because the tuba had become this huge instrument in Mexican LA. Very, very important. I grew up in Southern California. It was the guitar back then. Now it's the tuba. Took over. And the reason for that is varied, but it has a lot to do with Mexican immigrants wanting to show how well they've done. And so they hire bands with tubas and big brass, golden things and just gorgeous stuff. And because of this popularity of the tuba in that area, you were getting lots of tubas stolen. So I wrote two stories in a month, two front page stories of the LA Times in a month about tubas in Los Angeles. And from then on, I just began to interview tuba players. And I could not tell you why, Russ. I mean, I was in the middle of these books right here, the Dreamland book, which is about the opioid epidemic. I was just getting going on that. And I just kept on interviewing tuba players. But mostly I think it was because I found, and these were not just Mexican tuba players, it's just all sorts. There were people who did it because they truly loved it. Right? They truly loved it. There was no promise of wealth or fame. I mean, you could not name a tuba player. I couldn't at the time. And I just kept on interviewing them without any point, really. It was just kind of random stuff, but with the faith that I had learned from my journalism career, that if you stick with people who are doing something productive and positive with their lives, they will generate great stories. And so I kept on doing it as I wrote Dreamland about the opioid epidemic and OxyContin and all that. And then The Least of Us, which was about the Mexican trafficking world and switching to fentanyl and methamphetamine. And these were all very grim things. And then after those books were done, my agents, I said, I kind of can't write anymore about this extraordinarily grim topic of, it's really about people looking for happiness from something they buy. And I felt that, and she said, you should see what book you might be able to write about that tuba project that you had told me so much about. And so that's what got me into it without, again, knowing a thing about really the horn or certainly not how to play it,
Do you play any kind of instrument?
I play the guitar. I grew up in the 70s in Southern California, man. Half my friends played the guitar. Everybody played the guitar. And those days are over. We used to have like 5 or 6 guitar shops within a 3-4 mile radius of my house. Those days are gone for sure. And so, no, I don't. I love music. I've listened to all forms of music all my life. And so I just kind of got into this, but then see what really got me going was I began to find, I wanted to find a path away from writing about addiction. And what really started me down that path were these beautiful, beautiful stories. As a journalist, I was very attracted to the amazing stories of liberation. Really, the tuba in its essence is about liberation. It's about, it starts first, I think, with the great Bill Bell, Bill Bell was the greatest tuba player of his time, worked for the New York Philharmonic. And its importance is that he had recorded the first solo tuba record ever.
There aren't so many. There aren't that many. There aren't that many still.
There were none at that time. There are many more now, but there were none at that time. And he was, but what most struck me was that all the tuba players, the young kids at the time in the mid 60s, as this record began to percolate out, they were all alone with their tuba and directors who didn't understand their instrument and what they could do with it. And they listened to Bill Bell show them a brand new world. It liberated their horn in their own minds. I talked to many guys for whom this was the case, very much like when jazz players heard Charlie Parker for the first time, or rock guitar players heard Jimi Hendrix. All these tuba players hearing Bill Bell all of a sudden lifted the blinders, And then a few years after that, there was the event that I call Tuba Woodstock, which was the first conclave of all of the tuba nation, essentially, at Indiana University in 1973, where hundreds of tuba players were convened, an enormous symposium at the university. And it's for virtually every one of them, it was the very first time they'd seen more than like 4 or 5 tuba players in one place. They realized they were part of some large, beautiful nation. This created this kind of tuba consciousness and began what was also then the tuba civil rights movement, which is to say we are worth more than just being at the back of the band playing oompa and quarter notes and whole notes,
I just add that Indiana University has a storied music department, so it wasn't a weird little corner of rural America. It was a sign of recognition. Let's back up a minute. I discovered from reading your book 2 important facts. The tuba was invented in 1835, which is late in the world of human beings. The trumpet's thousands of years old in some fashion. The French horn is hundreds and hundreds of years old. I think I read it came from the late 16th century. So the tuba comes along, which plays deeper notes, more bends, longer, more tubing. And it's invented in 1835, and there are 3 kinds. Tell us about the 3 kinds.
Well, I guess what I like about this story is that the truth is, tubas come in as many kinds as there are almost as human beings. And by that, I mean, in different keys, there's C, there's double B flat, there's E flat, there's F, there's, some of them are enormous and very wide. Some of them are very small. There's the euphonium, which is the tenor tuba. There's eventually the sousaphone, which John Philip Sousa invents, which is the marching band that wraps around you. And then there's, of course, the concert tuba, which with the bell going up, facing skyward. But what I loved about it was that the tuba is not done being tinkered with. I still love the idea that they're still trying to figure out how to make it better. And now with worldwide competition, particularly lately, the Chinese, there's been all kinds of new, better approaches, different approaches to the tuba. But just generally speaking, it went from very low, like in the 20s and so on and 30s, to quality horns to what are now quite majestic and able to channel the virtuosity of players much more easily. That's what I've found to be fascinating about the whole thing.
So I have to confess, if you had asked me what is a tuba, I would have said a sousaphone, the marching band version, which is like a big giant circle that you wear on your shoulder. The tubing is then in front of you. I think, tragically or not, orchestral tubas, if you think about the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and you write about one of their legendary tuba players, Arnold Jacobs, a lot of us don't see that physically because they tend to be in the back. And if you'd said, what is that? Well, from a distance, well, it looks like a French horn, but it's not round. It's a little more oblong. Oh,
Right.
that's an orchestral tuba, evidently. But a lot of us think of the tuba as the sousaphone, as you write about quite a bit, its role in marching bands, which is enormous. It also, and you write at the same time about virtuosity outside of the marching band structure in all kinds of different settings. But I want to come back to your point about how this book was a counterpoint to your opioid interests, writing about that.
Right.
And I want to read a quote.
Yes.
And then I want to challenge it a bit. You say, quote, I had embarked on all this wanting to write about something very different from the topic that consumed my previous dozen years. By the end, though, I realized the tuba was actually not as far from the issue of drug addiction as I had imagined. Or better put, the tuba is so far away, it's the mirror opposite of addiction. Drug addiction is obedience to a substance, forsaking all else in the lonesome pursuit of immediate gratification from something you buy. It is the final expression of our consumer culture's empty promise that we can find happiness from a product that is for sale. An opioid overdose shuts down the respiratory system, stifling breath and life itself. The tuba requires nurturing that precious breath. It's about finding purpose from the wonder of sound you've learned to create yourself and from which you forge a sense of fulfillment, but which cannot be purchased other than by hard work, preparation, and persistence, collaborating with others, and the love of it all. Call it the tuba approach to life. No one ever got rich or famous playing the tuba, no internet adulation, no stadium shows, no posse, only an unnoticed middle-class life of nurturing your abilities. But that's why it's a sane thing. It's pairing life to what we need, not what we're told to want and incessantly demand. End of quote. I want to slightly disagree with that because when I read the book, and the book has portraits of many serious players and lots of high school students. And in a minute, we'll shift gears. We'll talk about band because it's a huge part of the book and it's extremely interesting. But a lot of the people who play tuba or who teach tuba are a little bit, I'll call them quirky. They're a little bit off the beaten track. And at one point you ask, are they attracted to tuba because they're quirky, or does tuba playing make them quirky, which is an unanswerable question. But what I want to suggest, and this is my slight disagreement, they strike the reader as obsessive, most of them. They are driven, at least the ones you've chosen to portray. They don't take the tuba the way I played the guitar, and maybe you, which is, this is fun. I can get a little better at it, and it fulfills some of my fantasies about music. And every once in a while, I make something that's somewhat beautiful. I used to be able to finger pick, and that was really, very gratifying. But I wasn't a serious musician. These folks aren't just serious musicians. They spend long periods of time, often making a single note, and it's a virtue. And they spend many days on tone and incredibly intense things. And these are not professionals, the ones I'm talking about. They strike me as a little bit obsessive. And it's also where I agree with you, and I want to see if you agree with this assessment. Their obsessiveness is what saves them. In the case of addiction to opioids, it destroys them. Addiction to tuba saves them. It is different, obviously, in many, many ways, but there is an obsessive quality and addiction that I feel they both have. Is that fair?
I agree that's true. I would say that there's a big difference, though, and that is that, well, first of all, think about how people come to the tuba. It's almost always in band. You cannot really play the tuba before you're 12 or 13 years old. You don't have the lung power. So it's really in
Can't
band.
hold it. It's physically large, too.
Exactly. So, and it's frequently people who don't want to play the tuba. Some of them never even heard of the tuba before they take it up. They are late for band class first day of 7th grade. That's how all the other instruments are taken. I mean, really, that's a very common story. However, and frequently there's kids maybe at the lower end of the social pecking order in high school. Remember, we're talking about high school band here. But through time, many people drop it, obviously, many people drop all kinds of instruments, but the ones who stick with it, what I found kind of in common, they share, is this feeling like through the tuba, they began to understand something about themselves. It was almost like it showed them their own capabilities when all around them were their peers telling them they were probably worth nothing.
Yeah.
Right. And when you find that is, if you find something that says you are worth something and you are capable, that is, in my view, people would come up to me and ask me one of my previous 2 books, how do I keep my kids away from drugs? And really, it's finding that feeling that you are worth something through another endeavor that doesn't have to do with drugs. It could be anything. In this case, it was, for so many people, it was the tuba. And so it does breathe this kind of feeling like, all of a sudden, I'm worth something. And that is a powerful, I would say narcotic, but that's not really, let's find a different word.
Yeah.
You know, it's this feeling of, I can do something. And then when you want to do something, when you see you can do something, you want to do it more. And it breeds that. And plus, then you're around people. And in the band world, the tuba player is kind of, you cannot have a good band without a good tuba section, tuba player or tuba section. It just doesn't happen. And so you really come to believe in yourself and see yourself as capable. And then that's extraordinary. Again, the tuba is about liberation. It's about freeing yourself to see all that you are capable of. Drugs are very different. Drugs are enslaving. They narrow your world, or addiction in general narrows your world into this is all you can do, all you find interesting. And so I would say this is really the big difference here. And it's a very, now a lot of kids don't go on to continue to play tuba, but what they learn playing the tuba, they carry with them. Attitudes, habits, etc., that help them throughout their lives.
And self-respect, which is really what you're talking about, I think, at the heart of this. There's another word I want to introduce that I don't think you talk about it explicitly much, but, reading your book, I found myself going to YouTube and occasionally to Spotify to try to listen to tuba playing of various kinds. You might want to, I encourage you to create a playlist of your favorite music that comes up in the book or the players. And other than The Flight of the Bumblebee, which is a famous, roughly minute-long solo many people may have heard, typically played by trumpet or violin, written by Rimsky-Korsakov, you can find a tuba player playing it at high speed, and it's kind of a shtick. It's not, I wouldn't call it inspiring. It's interesting. It's charming in a certain way. But the point I want to make is that tuba players don't get to solo. Generally, they may have a note or two. They may be audible in the background as the equivalent of a bass in a jazz band, but they're really part of an ensemble. And you matter as a tuba player, and you write about this a lot, and you try to find the words, and it's an ineffable feeling that a great tuba player playing a great tuba, a physically majestic sounding tuba, doesn't just produce a great tone the way, say, a Wynton Marsalis sounds on the trumpet. I love Wynton Marsalis playing alone on the trumpet. He's also great in a band. But a tuba player is doing this strange thing, uniting everybody else. And I think that's part of what the meaningfulness of it that you're getting at. It's not just you've mastered something, which is a huge issue for all human beings, is to master something. And to do it at a young age is an incredible gift. But to do it, master something that enables other people to join in is a very special thing, it seems.
Well, I agree with that's one of the things that first connected me up strangely, to these other two books I'd written about drug addiction, because drug addiction is really based on the shredding of community. It's all about your own isolation. You find yourself only caring about other people to the extent that they can help you find your drugs. And here I found the tuba was the community enhancer, right? Everybody feels so much like they're doing better when you have a good tuba player and a good horn to play with it. And so to me, that's absolutely what goes on. And on the contrary, frequently tuba players begin to believe that, well, I actually lead the band because all we need to do to prove that is if I play a little bit out of tune, the whole band falls apart, but that's a whole other story.
But it's very much, I said a bass in a jazz band. A bass is something in general that unless you're paying attention, you do not necessarily hear. There are pieces, obviously, in some bands that have extraordinary bass lines or bass players. But in general, the bass is doing something, again, ineffable, hard to put into words. And again, this thing you write about very poetically of how a tuba can do this if it's a high enough quality, both physical instrument and player is really very cool. Let's talk about band in a small town, which a lot of the book is writing about these extraordinary towns in Texas, tiny towns, 10,000 people or so, who are competing against Dallas and Houston and others in band competitions.
Right.
And in these tiny towns, a savior comes to town, like the Music Man, who happened to have been a fraud, but is redeemed by the end of the musical. A savior comes to town and takes a bunch of people who on the surface appear to be without any talent. They're just eager and transforms them. So talk about that.
Yeah.
And what that's really an extraordinary human thing, which is part of, I think, the inspiration and charm of your book, is that phenomenon is just an incredible thing.
Oh, I agree. And I'm so happy you brought up these stories because I was only going to write about tuba players. And then I began to realize that band directors are like tuba players, but on a big scale. That's why one of them said, we're not doing this for wealth or fame. We do it, put in unbelievable hours. I've never seen people work so many hours as these band directors in these small towns. And why? Because what motivates them is they see the lights go on in the eyes of their kids, frequently because that's what happened to them when they were in 10th grade or a freshman in college or whenever it was. And the story I think mostly you're referring to, although there were two great stories of this kind, that was the story of Al Cortinas. Al Cortinas was himself saved by being able to attend a small college where he majored in musical education, became a band director in the Rio Grande Valley. The area you're talking about is the Rio Grande Valley, along the border with Texas, along the Rio Grande, all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. The last 100 miles or so was the Rio Grande Valley, almost entirely Hispanic, 98% Hispanic or something like this, many of just from Mexico, many of them Mexican-American. But what the kids, as a rule, share is that they can barely afford their instruments. They in no way can afford musical lessons. And so Al Cortinas, teaching in the Rio Grande Valley for a number of years, developed some ideas, but about how, about how to change that. And he realized it's essential because at the time he's doing this, the drug cartels are really growing big and they are attracting a lot of these young kids. Lots of easy money, fancy cars, and all the rest. And at the same time, Texas band competition is becoming like football. So you compete and a band wins. Someone comes in second, third, fourth place. And he realized that he would, if he didn't improve the quality of his bands would never be able to compete across the state. And also a lot of his kids would be lost then to these drug cartels. He gets the opportunity to put his ideas into practice when he's hired at the Roma High School in Roma, Texas, which is a town, as you say, 11,000, almost entirely Hispanic. And the ideas that he has is in order to nurture the kids who he sees have amazing talent that are being gone to waste, just as his was about to years ago when he was a kid. He says, what we need to do, he convinces the board and the superintendent that what they need to do is hire 10 band directors, one for each instrument, and each band director will take kids who play, say, the clarinet, for example, and teach clarinet all the way through kids to 12th grade. And so kids will move to 6th, 7th, 8th with the same teacher, same with the French horn, same with percussion, same with tuba, same, And in this way, he believes, years of band directing convinced him of this, that you will not lose these kids along the way. This was what was happening. By 8th, 9th grade, they begin to fade away. This will still happen, but when the Cortina system came to Roma, Texas, Roma had barely had a band. It was really kind of just a social scene where kids met and monkeyed around. And all of a sudden, over the next several years, as these 6th graders became 7th, 8th, 9th, and the whole school got better, all of a sudden, you begin to see Roma, Texas competing with, yes, the suburban bands from Dallas, from Austin, from Houston. The first time they ever went to finals, the state finals where they're competing, there's like 250 bands in their class and it's down to 12 finalists. Many of them are from very wealthy suburbs of Austin or Dallas.
With all kinds of private music lessons as a result. And these guys are getting this, in bulk.
Right. That's what one guy told me, we're competing with this kids who get their lesson, who are taught by the symphonies of Texas. And we're not going to stop until we burst our way through there. And Roma, Texas, to this date, has never come in first. However, it has shown it. I don't think it matters either. It shows the beauty of band. I was interviewing lots of these band kids. The first time they ever went to finals was 2003 and 4. That's that whole season. And now, so it's 20 years later, I'm interviewing them, and they're all doing wonderfully well. They all have these prosperous, happy families, good jobs. Many of them are not in music. Some of them are band directors again. Al Cortines has 81 students who are now band directors somewhere in the Rio Grande Valley. It's a remarkable idea, but most of his kids did not go on to that. They go on to solid middle class lives because band teaches the values that sustain community. That's the beautiful natural resource that is marching band in America. It's unlike any other public music education system in the world, according to people I've talked to about this.
Yeah, it's an incredible thing. It's actually, I teared up reading about, I remember it was Roma or the neighboring town Lopez that comes back into town and is greeted by an entourage of police cars, and the contrast between their simple life, which is unadorned by wealth and luxury, and walking into the San Antonio indoor stadium that probably seats 60,000, right? And it's mostly empty for this competition. It must have been extraordinarily, but it's intimidating either way. But the point I want to emphasize here, which I think is quite extraordinary, is that these are not kids who auditioned for band and got chosen because they were gifted. They just signed up, and it's unless you tell me if I'm wrong, it's just a cross section of the people who were interested in learning how to play something. It's not like they said, "Oh, I've been great on the violin. Now I'll join marching band." They never done anything musical in their life other than enjoy music. Is that correct? That's what's stunning about this.
That is absolutely correct. And it's also a little bit their parents saying, you do this because there's nothing else. Or, you do this, you're kind of chubby. You don't run fast. You're not fast enough for the football team or the basketball team and all that. And what's amazing is that this took hold after that in the Rio Grande Valley. And so bands all across there are many, many, many small towns. I can't even count them all. There are many. And each one has their own school district and so on. Everyone has a band now. And remarkable thing, there's this thing called Tuba Christmas that every December that people come together and play. Tuba Christmas in the Rio Grande Valley is very different than Tuba Christmas in anywhere else in the United States because it's almost entirely kids 18 and under who are still in high school. Across the country, people play the tuba, give it up, but still keep their tubas and they bring it out to play Tuba Christmas. But in the Rio Grande Valley, people do not have money to hold on to a very expensive tuba for the rest of their life, for the luxury of playing it once a year and so on. So all the people who play Tuba Christmas are 18 and under. And there are hundreds of tuba players. Now, I went post-COVID 2023, the 50th anniversary of Tuba Christmas, and there was 350 tuba players, all driven to the McAllen, Texas Performing Arts Center by their band directors, by the way, by their tuba instructors and so on. But before COVID, they had 650 tuba players. And what that means is that people see that and they understand the threat of not being in something that will take up so much of your time and channel your energies, because the drug cartels are right there. There is no mistaking who these people are and what they're about. And so people are like, my kids are going to be in band, and they let those teachers, it's not none of this coddling. One parent said, parents come to me and say, do you mind your kids being out there working in the rain and marching? And I said, no. Because that's how they get to where they are. If it was lightning, I'd say, okay, but everything else, I'm fine with it, Yeah,
it's an extraordinary American story, and it reminds me. I want to come back to this question of average ability, but I first want to make a side note, which you don't write about in the book, and there are many reasons you chose not to, but most of the players and most of the teachers are men.
Yes.
And most of the victims of opioid addiction, correct me if I'm wrong, are men. And
a lot.
There's an issue in America. A lot of people have started to think about it, write about it, that the boys and young men of America are having a tough time.
Indeed.
I don't want to speculate, quote, whose fault that is, whether it's anybody's fault. Let's put that to the side. But what struck me about this is that for so many of these either physically struggling because they're overweight or they're bullied because they're different, for so many of these young men, this is a lifeline. It's not just it's something fun to do and it gives you life purpose and it builds discipline and character. It's a lifeline.
I could not agree more. And it's also the antithesis, the answer to all that we have allowed to develop in our country, in my opinion, through, social media apps and pornography and gambling and video games and porn, and you can go on, and junk food and hyperpotent marijuana and on and on and on and on. All of this is this is what one guy was telling me. One band director said, all that stuff that you wrote about in the Least of Us and Dreamland, the answers to it are right here. And it's when he told me that, I began to think of this book in a bigger way. It's about providing, and how do I think about it? That the extraordinary importance of insisting on hard work. That's why it's in the subtitle, of perseverance, of quiet focus, as you say, of training kids early on with just one note. This leads to very well-adjusted, frequently well-adjusted anyway, kids who do well in school, who love what they do, who go on because they've been trained in certain values that, again, sustain community and sustain strong businesses. They sustain strong personal lives, churches, and all the rest. You get from band this enormous impact that is in countering all the things that I think afflict many people, but certainly young men, as you rightly say, I think you get away from the easy, the kickback, the immediate gratification, which is what drugs are all about. But so is, smartphone with TikTok, and so is all the other stuff. And again, there was this story. I don't know if it's true or not. Could be apocryphal, but a band director's asked, "How'd your band do this year?" The end of the year. "How'd your band do this year?" And the band director goes, "Too soon to tell. Ask me in 10 years." Because band's about winning later. It's really the idea that one can come in first and second. That's fine, but it's really not about that.
So there's this great quote. I forget who said it in the book. It's not important because its depth transcends it transcends whoever said it, and the wording's not particularly clever or witty, but it's, someone is asked, "How did you get this ragtag group of kids who didn't have any experience to get to the finals?" And he says, quote, "There are no secrets, you just work hard." And I want to dig deeper into that because, there are schools that have chosen other things. Sports is one example. There's schools that have had incredible success with their chess team. The kids are not, quote, super high IQ. They might be brighter than average, but they're not like geniuses. So I want to focus on this crazy idea that it's possible merely through hard work, merely through devotion, to achieve greatness. And I want to emphasize, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but when these small high schools come in second or win or just come into the finals, it's not like people feel sorry for them. And they say, "Oh, well, they're poor and they come from a tiny school, so let's cut on some slack. Their playing's not very good," but no, their playing is good. It takes a long time. And I want to look at a recent quote from Andrei Karpathy. I don't know how to pronounce his last name correctly, but he's a AI, artificial intelligence person, extraordinary thinker. He says in a recent post on Twitter, on X, agency is more important than intelligence. He says, quote, "I had this intuitively wrong for decades. I think due to a pervasive cultural veneration of intelligence, various entertainment, media, obsession with IQ, etc. Agency is significantly more powerful and significantly more scarce. Are you hiring for agency? Are we educating for agency? Are you acting as if you had 10 times agency?" And then he quotes, it appears, as far as I can tell from the post, he quotes Grok. He asks Grok, "What is agency?" And Grok's answer is kind of extraordinary. Quote, "Agency as a personality trait refers to an individual's capacity to take initiative, make decisions, and exert control over their actions and environment. It's about being proactive rather than reactive. Someone with high agency doesn't just let life happen to them, they shape it. Think of it as a blend of self-efficacy, determination, and a sense of ownership over one's path." And I read this as I was finishing your book, and I thought, that's exactly the gift that these band directors give these unexceptional, on the surface, because in terms of the equivalent here of intelligence would be, say, musical ability, perfect pitch, dexterity with their fingers, ability to make tones with their great lungs, to sustain a note. These kids don't have that. Instead, they have to make up for it with agency. And that's a gift that lasts a lifetime.
And I think, yes, and thank you for another very thoughtful question. To me, this is essential part of this book, I think, and also an essential part of why band is so important. Talent is overrated. Some people are enormously talented right from the get-go, and that's wonderful, and you should nurture them. But talent is overrated. Hard work, which is just another way of saying agency, according to your fellow there. To me, that is where you come to, but you have to build that. You have to nurture that. You have to teach kids, particularly nowadays, how you find the benefits that they will find by hard work, by channeling that developing agency. And I think there are many ways of doing this. I chose tuba playing and band. I'm sure you could write another book about chess in high schools without a doubt. But to me, I love the idea about band and tuba playing because nobody pays any attention. They get no props. They're not famous. Yeah. And yet, and we all hear all these, like, I would say platitudes almost now about the importance of sports and teaching life lessons. And I played sports in high school, and I buy some of that. I don't think it's wrong. However, during this book, I began to realize, the kids who are learning the most precious lessons, the kids who are putting this into practice and then going on in life to put these ideas and these values into practice, are the kids up in the bleachers playing for the athletes down on the field. That's where you find, and any board of education, any superintendent now, I believe, would be committing almost education malpractice to be cutting the budget constantly for those endeavors. You are getting such enormous bang for the buck in terms of just human impact, and getting beyond the idea that in order to be good, to be valued, you must be talented from the get-go.
And I've made fun of Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000-hour thesis. We're not going to debate whether he really said it or what he meant by it, because there's been a lot of, to me, uninteresting back and forth about that. But the interesting claim is that hard work can bring mastery. And I have always believed that that's not true in certain areas. That, there's, like, I don't care how hard I work at basketball. I'm 5'6". I'm not going to be a great basketball player. It'll take a lot more than 10,000 hours. But in today's EconTalk episode that you haven't heard yet, and our listeners will have heard by the time this comes out, I have an interview with David Bessis, who argues that mathematics, anybody can really get good at it. And that I've always hated those kind of what I've always thought of as rose-colored glasses. Oh yeah, we're all equal. There's no exceptionality. Skill's not that important. But I think that's silly. But what's not silly is that sufficient devotion makes up for a lot. In the case of math, he's even arguing something doesn't take thousands of hours. It takes a different way of thinking about what math really is. But in this case, if you had told me that people have trouble detecting that they're playing poorly, which some of your successful superstars have trouble with, I would have said, nah, that's in a movie. That's not. So I think it's really, it's a heartwarming lesson in so many ways, but it's also clear it's a lot more than 10,000 hours probably for a lot of these kids. They devote an enormous part of their waking hours to succeeding.
And this is the beauty of band, because it is very inclusive. That term is overused today, I think, but in band, it's absolutely true. All you need really is the desire to play better and to march better and to work with others and work hard with others. Yeah. And so also you don't face most of the time, you don't face any life-mangling injuries as a result of it. And so what's beautiful though is I find it's to find people who were in band once, and they will tell you, all you do is scratch them a little bit. Oh, you were in band? What'd you play? How'd you like it? I was talking with a federal judge, West Virginia. Oh man, I played trombone in band. How'd you like it? It changed my life. I mean, you hear this. It's not uncommon to hear this stuff, And he didn't want to be a trombone player, or maybe he did, but he didn't become one. But one of the beautiful images I love about the tuba is the tuba is a little bit like a folk saint. So you may know I lived in Mexico for many years, and I've written a lot about Mexican immigration, and my first 2 books are about Mexico. And so the idea of folk saints, of your own saint to kind of watch over you as you go through life. For many tuba players, the tuba is a folk saint in that it teaches them all these these really, really important lessons in life. Again, hard work, attention to detail, focus, perseverance through failure, all of these things. It just frequently cannot give you the professional economic sustenance for a real happy life. So people leave it behind. But many times I hear this, it's like what I learned from the tuba stays with me. It's like the tuba is watching over me, even though I'm not playing it. And I always dream that I could. That's why so many people have tubas in their basement and play tuba Christmas. It's because they thought one day they wanted to, and then it never happened. But the tuba is still there, watching over them.
But it's like sports in that way. Sports, high school sports has a very powerful impact on people who do it
Yes.
at a even modestly high level. As you point out, there aren't a lot of tuba jobs. There's a limited number of symphony orchestras. For a long time, Disney World hired a lot of tubas and band members, but they cut back. And that's a very interesting part of the book, the role that Orlando plays in tuba culture.
Amazing stuff, hey?
Yeah, encourage listeners to read the book. But there aren't a lot of professional sports jobs either. And young men and women dream of athletic success, and inevitably, most of them are going to have to be disappointed. So they have to have a wistfulness, knowing that dream, which they did have for a while, perhaps, is not going to come true, and cherish what they get out of it. But as you point out, which I love this line, unlike football, band is really about winning later. And that's your quote about, I'll see how my band turns out in 10 years. But of course, it's also true of great football coaches. They understand that most of their charges will not have a career in the NFL, won't get a Division I scholarship even, and whatever they do for them that's good comes from those times in high school.
But it's also, I think frequently those are the lucky ones.
Yeah.
Those are the ones who say, I can't be this great basketball player, whatever, football player, but I can use what I learned in doing the sport to be a success and happy and content and frankly fulfilled. This is a very important word to me. After writing about addiction, where people looking for blasts of pleasure, I've come to understand fulfillment as being the deeper thing that we are looking for, and happiness doesn't quite get there, in my opinion. So you're looking for that fulfillment. The difference with band is just so many more kids can be in band than can play football or basketball, certainly for that matter. It's a way of saying we want all of you to be part of this beautiful experience of working hard and competing and relying on each other. It's not just for the athletes, it's for you too. And it gives me chills. I get chills right now talking to you about this, Russ, saying it's such a beautiful, beautiful thing. And again, of course, so opposite from the addiction to dope and everything else we addicted to in our culture that I was writing about in the previous two books. It just is. Anyway, it makes me kind of almost like get romantic and I just get carried away. What can I tell you?
Yeah, there's a quote which I'd never heard, but evidently it's a well-known saying. A musician is someone who puts a $5,000 instrument in a $500 car to get to a $50 gig.
Yeah.
And of course, most musicians they might wish it otherwise, but they're not playing for the $50. And they might prefer it to be more than that, obviously, for their playing. But they play for the love of it. And that they can still play it all, as many musicians find sufficiently rewarding, fulfilling.
No, I think that's why Tuba Christmas continues to be this huge thing. Huge thing all across the country with hundreds of tuba players in Kansas City, Dallas, New York was where it started. But down in McAllen, Texas, too. I mean, you've got all these people, all across the country who hold on to their tubas. And people in a different way who hold on to their memories of band. I'm trying to come up with, there's a pipe dream of mine, but at some point I'd like to come up with some kind of tally of what percentage of Americans were at one point in band. You know, I mean, I think you may be talking about 20% of the country at some point. I don't know if that's true at all, of course, but it seems to me such an important part of people's lives that you would never know until you dig down into their conversation with them. And then all of a sudden you say, oh yeah, they played piccolo, or oh yeah, I played trombone. And you begin to see how important this endeavor is to creating happy lives, contented, fulfilled lives, but also I believe that they bring essential, you learn in band essential elements, elements essential to sustaining community, you know, in a broader sense. And that was, I can tell you all of this. I also find this beautiful because as a journalist, 2 years ago, I would have had nothing like this to say to you about this project. I didn't know what the project was about. And I just said, I know that if I push on into the lives of people who are doing something because they love it, that I'm going to find some amazing stories. I knew that from past experiences as a reporter for many years, and this just proved it doubly so. It just was a beautiful experience. That on and on and on, these bizarre stories of people just doing something. You know, Jim Self, great tuba teacher, and at USC, retired, built an enormous practice hall on top of his house. 38 feet long enough to contain the longest sound wave of the lowest register tuba, which is 36 foot long sound wave. You know, why? Because he wanted to liberate. He was, again, it's about part of liberation. It's what you find. It liberates so many people. I was tired of playing in practice rooms at USC that are 10 by 10 built for trumpets. So he builds this enormous, beautiful hall. I've been in 3 times. It's just incredible. And because he wants to free up this gorgeous sound that he can create. And he's never been anything less than in love with this beautiful sound that he learned to create when, you know, as a kid back in his teen years. So
I'm going to tell you, pick a strange analogy here.
Yeah.
Some people know a little bit about wine, the beverage, and they drink it at some level of seriousness or not. Some people just say, I know what I like. I like this wine. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
But other people go into it quite deeply and learn about different regions and the terroir, the soil that the grapes were grown in, and so on and so on. And it becomes I think for many people, a deeply enriching experience. And it's part of dining, which is an important eating is incredibly important human ritual, and so on. So music, I would argue, is another incredibly important human ritual. And I'm curious, a lot of the book, which we haven't talked about, and I think you have to read about it to really appreciate it, a lot of the book is devoted to the actual title of the Perfect Tuba. It's about the physical manufacturing challenge of improving the sound that the instrument makes. And most people have heard of a Stradivarius. They understand that they're these legendary violins that have a unique tone that can never be perfectly recreated, or at least it feels that way. And similarly, in the tuba world, there are these 2 legendary tubas that people have tried to replicate. And some of the book, not a large part, but not a small part, is about that. But here's my question for you. You're not a horn player. You're not a serious musician. You're a casual musician, I think, as I am. But I love music, and I suspect you do too, or you wouldn't have written this book.
Right.
So I'm curious. You're in that hall, that crazy thing that this guy built on top of his house. You've heard a lot of bands in the course of writing this book. Obviously, and this is the wine part, among aficionados, there are certain tones and sonic effects that move them deeply as professionals.
Yeah.
You're not a professional. Could you yourself capture any of that when you were listening to tuba players? Could you say, oh, that brightness is exactly right, or that, again, it's also like winemaking. There's all this language and jargon around it, and insider language. And did you get that?
That is such a great question. I don't think I did. Honestly, I don't think I did. I think where I found the most like profound feelings was in interviews with tuba players. My method of working is I don't do almost any interviews for just once for an hour. It's numerous interviews, and it depends on the person, on the story, how many those are, But it was coming to some of the ideas that we've been talking about is where I began to feel like elevated. You remember perhaps the first story in the book, little Willie Clark at the time, 6th grade, feels he's playing the big B flat note in the sound of Star Trek, and he's taking the band and they're lifting off, and he's doing it himself and he can't even believe it. And oh my God, and that note stayed with Willie Clark. He just retired at 55 from the Air Force ceremonial band. Talking with people who have felt these kinds of things and getting them to talk about it, particularly tuba players, because no one ever thought anyone would ask them about these experiences. And when I start calling people around, they're like looking at their phone like, who the hell are you, man? But, God bless them. Every one of them, many people wanted to talk about this once they realized I was not some con artist, And so I guess where in answer to your question, it's a beautiful question. I would say that it's through understanding these new ideas that I began to sense the same exhilaration, perhaps, that they felt, that Willie Clark felt in 6th grade, which is the first time he ever felt anything like this, he told me. And others throughout the book have similar moments of just beautiful elevation and agency, feeling like this is what they created. And again, I get back to the theme of liberation. Tuba is about liberation. It's about freeing yourself of the constraints that you would put on your instrument and yourself, and others would put on your instrument and yourself. And so I guess that's how I would answer it, is that I remember being completely captivated by this project within about 4 or 5 months. I had been doing interviews with tuba players for 10 years, on and off, without much focus, without much, attempt to kind of narrow the idea down. And then all of a sudden I really begin to get into it, and I begin to think, oh my God. Oh my goodness, this is more profound and beautiful than anything I could possibly imagine. And I finished the book thinking that for sure, and that this is exactly the kind of book I should have been written. The best sequel to a book about OxyContin and heroin. Oh, there we go. And then another book about fentanyl and methamphetamine. There's a book about band directors and tuba players. I mean, sometimes you feel like I'm just not worthy for the beauty of this profession. Sometimes I'm not. It's so gorgeous. It's so fantastic what you can learn and what you can see if you dig in. That does not mean me playing. I tried one time to play one of those perfect tubas. And it sounds like very much like when your stomach's growling, you haven't eaten for a while. That's the noise that I made on the damn thing. So I don't want to repeat that disgraceful performance. But it's this beauty of finding people who no one has ever interviewed, and no one has ever paid any attention to. A few interviews, and they realize, oh, this guy's serious. That first phone call, he was not kidding. And all this, and this is what happened. I interviewed many people numerous times. Poor Al Cortinas down in Roma, Texas. That guy interviewed, 10, 12 times, Bob Carpenter, one of those guys who's trying to recreate, and Tom Treese, both of those guys, trying to recreate the perfect tuba down in Orlando, Florida. Those poor guys, they've been interviewed by me so many times, but that's how you get. Again, I learned kind of what the lessons of band, right? Focus, persevere. It's collaboration with others. Anyway, I get a little excited about this stuff, but it's so beautiful. It's just so beautiful, and I was just so lucky to be able to do these stories. I'm not kidding.
My guest today has been Sam Quinones. His book is The Perfect Tuba. Sam, thanks for being part of EconTalk.
As always, Russ, just a wonderful time talking with you. Thank you very much.
This is EconTalk, part of the Library of Economics and Liberty. For more EconTalk, go to econtalk.org, where you can also comment on today's podcast and find links and readings related to today's conversation. The sound engineer for EconTalk is Rich Goyette. I'm your host, Russ Roberts. Thanks for listening. Talk to you on Monday.